Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here this morning. My name is Rose Dickey. I'm a reporter at TechCrunch. This is the food tech panel, aka the new foodie. So I have Nicolas Jammet of Sweetgreen, and Sweetgreen is a salad shop which got its roots on the East Coast. Then we have Merkl of Maple. It's on-demand food delivery that works with some top chefs in New York City. And then we have Ilya Pappas of Blue Apron. They do meal kit delivery for people who want to cook at home. So the food tech industry has seen billions of dollars in investment to date, but in the last year or so, we've actually seen some of these food tech companies struggling, either losing some of their top executives or just shutting down entirely. So Ilya, let's start with you. Why do you think so many food tech companies are struggling right now?
Well, I think the food industry is an industry that hasn't really been touched by technology for some time. And so a few years ago, there was a lot of companies kind of flooding into the space, and it's really important when you're starting a business to have a good business plan and good unit economics kind of from the start. And so, I think with this influx of companies coming in, maybe some didn't really have the best business plans together, and if it's hard to find traction, then yeah, it's one of those things where it doesn't quite line up. But there's still a lot of very strong companies that are doing well, and as long as you're equipped with good unit economics, you're in good shape.
Caleb, Maple is relatively new to the food tech space. How scary is it to see all this turmoil in the food tech?
It is terrifying. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's a little bit silly, honestly. I think that, as Ilya was sort of pointing out, every industry has companies that sort of start and fail. I think that it's been a little bit accentuated just because if you think of, the last 2 years certainly was a time that food sort of crescendoed in terms of investor interest. And I think you layer on top of that the fact that valuations were sort of crescendoing, if you will, as well at the same time. And so I think we're sort of coming off of both of those things. But as Ilya pointed out, I think that food is an industry that just has not been fundamentally changed by technology. And so there are still going to be very, very large businesses built as people do figure out the right business models.
Right, and all three of you have raised a pretty good amount of funding for your respective companies. Nick, how necessary is funding in order to survive right now in the food tech space?
I think for any startup, funding is pretty important. For us, our business is building retail, and so that is pretty capital intensive, but even more importantly than that is having the funds to be able to build a team and look ahead and be able to invest the right resources. And so for us, as we build retail, I think we're looking at building this food company a little differently, and we are investing in things like a full stack technology team, which a lot of restaurant companies don't have at our size. So I think really looking at the vision and for the growth of where we want to be and making sure that we can invest in the team and giving them the right resources to get there.
Right. Caleb, do you see yourself raising more funding, especially as you think about expansion into areas other than one particular part of Manhattan?
Yeah, I think that we were very lucky to have Thrive and Green Oaks Capital come in pretty big early on for us. With they both really bought into sort of the long-term vision of what we're trying to build. I think our view is that we're always talking to people. We're always willing to listen to people who want to invest money. I think the question is like, what's the right price? What's the right time for the business? So it's not something that we sort of think of this as a very discrete sort of thing, but just sort of an ongoing conversation. So I'm sure at some point as we continue to scale, we'll probably look at more capital, and again, it's just about right time, right price, right group.
Given the current funding environment, how hard do you think it will be to get VCs on board with you?
Yeah, I think that the last couple of years, capital's definitely been a lot easier to get your hands on. I think that there's been a shift from, and you guys have written about this a lot, there's been a shift from sort of a mentality of just focusing on growth at all costs to unit economics, so which I think is a good and a healthy one. I honestly think it's a pretty good sort of leveling or adjustment. I think it means that less companies are going to enter the fray really, really easily, and so it means that companies that are performing are going to get capital. I mean, obviously, we've seen that VC firms have raised something like the most they have in the last quarter, a long time. So there's plenty of capital out there. I think it's just going to be deployed into companies that are performing.
Got it. I'd like to talk a little bit about the W-2 versus 1099 contractor. So Nicolas, this won't involve you for a little bit. But so with Blue Apron, you don't hire W-2 employees to make your deliveries, but at Merkl you do. I'd like for both of you to kind of tell me what your thinking is behind that and defend your strategy behind that. We can start with you, Ilya.
Sure, yeah. At Blue Apron, we have a little over 3,600 employees now, and most of those are hourly employees in our 3 nationwide fulfillment centers. And when we were starting the business, it was one of those things where, because we're dealing with fresh food every week, and we're changing the menus every week, and we never repeat one in a year, there are about 100 different ingredients that go through each of our fulfillment centers each week. And so because of that and the variety there, it's really important to have a labor force that's trained up and understands the different food and the quality of the ingredients. And so from the start, it was important that we had to build our own staff and provide benefits and make sure that we were building a culture, especially when you have 1,000 people in a warehouse. I don't think we could have done it with just a pure contract labor force.
But for the people actually making the deliveries of the boxes, those are not employees, or are they?
We don't do our own deliveries, actually. We rely on third-party courier services like FedEx and a number of other carriers kind of throughout the nation.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, we wanted to reach as wide an area as early as possible, so working with third-party carriers enabled us to scale. We deliver to over 99% of the country now, and if we had our own kind of drivers, that would be pretty expensive to do.
Got it. Caleb, can you?
Yeah, I mean, similar thing for us. I think there are novels that have been written at this point on 1099 versus W-2s, and there's certainly experts out there who can opine more intelligently than I can. I think for us, my take is just that there's a right sort of setup for different businesses, and for us it was pretty clear that W-2 just made sense. We have very few touch points with our customers, and our delivery team members are one of those. So things like training and are just important to us and important to that one touch point we have with the customer.
As you start thinking about scaling, as I previously mentioned, so Merkl is currently operating in a small portion of Manhattan. If you start thinking about scale, even as Ilya mentioned, do you think you might eventually outsource these, or at least the delivery aspect of the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've never thought of as a fundamental thing in our business that we had to own. I think right now, from a unit economic standpoint, there's not really a company out there that can sort of hit the numbers that we're hitting. So it doesn't make economic sense right now. I think as we scale, it's not going to look the same, as Blue Apron. We're not going to sort of be at, 99% of the country. We're going to be in very specific cities and very specific parts of those cities. So the model will still work for us. I think the question is, and there are a bunch of companies out there who are obviously trying to sort of build last mile really, really efficiently. Does one of those companies emerge in a way that could serve the volume that we look at in a cost-effective way? Which, who knows? So we'll see.
Right. How do you see self-driving vehicles playing into your long-term delivery strategy?
Yeah, I mean, so I was bearing the lead there, which is that we're just going to skip over this and go to self-driving. It's again, there's probably some better experts out there on self-driving cars. When it happens, we'll get there and we'll think about it. It doesn't seem like it's something that in the next year or two is going to be hugely impactful for our business. So, when that hits, when drones hit, we'll. I know Pizza Hut or Domino's is testing a sidewalk driving drone somewhere in Australia. So all this stuff is starting to find its way out there.
Yeah. Ilya, do you have any thoughts on self-driving cars,
Yeah,
delivery.
This was not in the prep, by the way.
It's been exciting to watch from the sidelines. And I'm not an expert on it, but there is a lot of speculation that one of the first industries would be trucking, which is obviously pretty important to us. And,
Right.
I think that could obviously reduce costs for transcontinental shipping, but we don't. I think it's still a ways out.
Yeah. So delivery is, of course, a big part of both of your businesses. Nick, Sweetgreen does not deliver. It has an order ahead mobile app. Why won't Sweetgreen deliver?
Yeah, so I think as we start to understand our customer better, which I think we all serve the same customer, what we see is that convenience is something that is driving their behavior now. So I think that if you look at all of our businesses, they're serving that consumer in a more convenient way, different use cases. So as we look at the future of Sweetgreen or the future of food and how people are going to eat, I don't think it's necessarily, someone's going to always be ordering or someone's always going to be going into a restaurant. But what is different is people want it. They want to alleviate the pain points of all those transactions. So they just want it to be more convenient. So, for us, looking back 3 years, every single customer at Sweetgreen had to come in and wait in line, sometimes for 20, 30, 40 minutes. Today, our customers can download our app as they're walking to Sweetgreen, order their meal, and have it paid for, have their loyalty points registered, walk in, grab it off a shelf, and walk out. So I think that as we think of the future of food and the future of retail, I think retail is still very important, but it has to evolve to make sure to answer that demand for more convenience.
And one could even say that the retail experience is kind of part of our everyday human social interactions. Does that have anything to do with your decision to not deliver, or is that just, am I on my own with this?
No, it's actually a great point, because when we think about the Sweetgreen experience, the full service design, it's not just about the food or the convenience. It really is about the full experience, the interacting with the team member, the design, the music, everything, and even that social interaction you get between other customers. And there is a different emotional experience there of walking into retail and enjoying it and sitting there. And I think that any food company that's growing, they have to be able to connect emotionally with the customer. I think that these two brands, up here have also done a really good job of that. And I think that food is very emotional. So I think that no matter what and where you serve it or how you serve it, you've got to find a way to connect with the guests. And for us, it's through service design and service experience.
What are the margins like at Sweetgreen?
Healthy.
From a financial standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when we look at our margins versus best in class, we're right in line. And for us, it's really trying to balance building a supply chain where we can pay our farmers the right price, paying our team members the right wages, and also having a price that is accessible enough to most of our customers. So I think that when we balance all those things, and also balance that with having a business that can be profitable and still grow, that's kind of where we find our equilibrium.
Right. Margins seem to be a lot tougher in the delivery space. Caleb, can you talk to me about your margins over at Maple?
Yeah, I mean, so we're obviously still very subscale, and we're only in 4, as you've pointed out, only in 4 small neighborhoods in New York. I think for us, we actually, we do lose. I agree that there's a bunch of crossover in customers, right? But I think that, for the customer who does want delivery, we're essentially building a platform that's going to be able to deliver the best value, and it's going to allow us to sort of capture the most margin. And that's because if you just think of sort of the spectrum from a full-blown marketplace to a traditional brick and mortar retail operation, we're sort of somewhere in the middle, right? And so we're purpose building this infrastructure to allow us to really get enormous leverage out of our locations. So we always use Chipotle as an example, just because they got 42 locations below Central Park. They do something like 50,000 meals a day just below Central Park. We would build something like 8 locations to service that same volume. So we end up building fewer locations. We end up paying significantly less per rent just because we're not on rent, just because we're not foot traffic driven. And then we get enormous leverage out of our labor in those locations, and that sort of adds up to industry leading or better margins. So from a business model standpoint, as our business scales, it's going to become really attractive from a margin standpoint.
Got it. Ilya, what are margins like at Blue Apron?
I think in line with the rest of the answers, our margins are very good. They've been great from the start, and what's been really exciting is, there's no software to run a business like ours. So our engineering team has had to build a lot of software to run our operations in our fulfillment centers to kind of direct these thousands of warehouse associates to make sure that our business has been efficient. And so we've seen some really great pickup over the past couple years. And what's really exciting about that is that as our margins improve, coupled with improvements in the supply chain efficiencies, similar to Sweetgreen, we're working directly with farms, hundreds of farms now actually, to kind of plant seeds in the ground to harvest 12 to 18 weeks later. And with those efficiencies, we're actually able to ultimately down the road pass those savings on to customers, so we can actually make this something that the whole country can enjoy from a pricing standpoint.
So when we were backstage, I mentioned to you that I've tried Blue Apron, and my experience with it was okay. It took me a little over an hour to prepare the meal, even though it said it would take maybe 30 minutes tops. Is Blue Apron underestimating the amount of time it takes to actually prepare a meal?
Yeah, so as we were discussing backstage, my wife can do it in about 30 minutes, but yeah, for me, it takes me a little bit longer because I like to kind of plan everything out ahead of time. But yeah, one of those things that we're focusing on is creating recipes that are quick to cook and still taste incredible. And I'm sorry if I offended you by saying your knife skills might need a little bit of work, but that's the number one thing we hear is that we have all these great tips and tricks videos online where people can learn the fastest way to chop an onion, and that's probably one of the best things for me is that I've really picked up on that prep time.
Got it. The other feedback I have, and I've heard this from other people, is just that there's a lot of packaging that comes in a Blue Apron box. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're very aware of and thinking of ways constantly to improve our packaging. Obviously we want to make sure that the food stays fresh and safe in transit, so we have to package it appropriately. However, this is something that's top of mind, and we have a team that's actually working on looking at better ways. But all of our packaging is biodegradable or recyclable, and we actually offer free return shipping for customers to send their box and packaging back, and it's using the existing USPS network, so it's not adding an additional footprint. It's just
how many people are actually using the recycling program?
I don't have the exact numbers on that. We launched that towards the end of last year, and it's seen some pretty good pickup so far. But obviously, these are things that we're constantly looking to improve.
Yeah, okay. Caleb, do you think sustainability and scalability are both possible?
Yeah, I think they are. I think that there's, particularly on the ingredient sourcing side, you run into, and these guys probably, being at bigger scale, probably have even a better sense of that, but we run into things like we don't serve salmon because we can't get it. It's one of the least sustainably raised fish, and we can't currently get it sort of at our volume at a price point that makes sense. I think as you get more scale, some of those things come into play, but you also end up saying, hey, now I'm serving, however many, I don't know what your most public number of meals per month is, but I'm serving a huge number of meals per month, and I need, whole fields of one particular ingredient. And so you end up doing, I think, what these guys are doing, which is partnering with purveyors and farmers to get out ahead of that.
Right. And I want to talk about competition because in my book, all three of you are competitors. Does anyone disagree with that?
I think we are competitors, but I mean, we have a very different view, and maybe you guys share this, of competition is, I think this healthy segment that we're in, this need that we're serving, is growing so quickly, and I think that collectively our category, our type of food, we can convert people from the old way of eating, the McDonald's or the whatever other food they can get delivered, the unhealthy food. I think then we convert someone to eating that way. So that means that they'll eat at Sweetgreen one day a week, they'll have Blue Apron one night for dinner, they'll have maple for lunch the next day. You know, we don't, as much as I would love this, we don't expect customers to eat at Sweetgreen 14 meals a day. So I think that if, you know, they can convert a customer and then they come into Sweetgreen, I think collectively we are more competing against the older guard of food.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that, you know, when we think of competition, there's certainly some overlap between our customer bases, and there's some, you know, there's some customers that are sort of standalone. So there's certainly customers that are ordering from Maple because they don't want to cook at all, right?
Right.
So that's one extreme, but then there are customers who agree, as much as we'd love people to eat Maple every single day, people have slots and they sort of cycle through their leading choices. I think for us, and particularly when you're thinking of building a business in food, it's just such a big space. You actually sort of have the luxury of focusing on your mission and just focusing on executing against that. You know, so we think for Maple, in terms of competition, we think of, you know, from a price standpoint, it's walking to a fast casual restaurant and picking something up. There really isn't a delivery option that's all in, sort of at our, you know, $12 for lunch, $15 for dinner price point.
Well, there is Sprig, of course.
Yeah, and I don't know if all in it gets you there at $12, but there aren't a ton of them either way. And I think, you know, so we focus on sort of that as sort of from a price competitive, the landscape of competitors. And then from a quality standpoint, it really is, you know, going to your neighborhood bistro, or it's, you know, deciding to cook at home or something like that. So we feel like we're in a pretty good niche of sort of balancing, you know, what our value prop is.
Ilya, who are your competitors?
Who are our competitors?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're competing with anywhere that people get dinner at home. So we're competing with takeout, we're competing with you know, grocery stores to a certain extent. But, you know, I think to Caleb's point, it's, you know, food in this country is a $1.4 trillion industry, and there's plenty of space there for everybody to play. You know, I use all three of these products in harmony, and it's not like I'm trying to decide between them. But our focus on competition, you know, obviously we pay attention to what other companies are doing out there, but you know, as long as we're making our product as great as possible for our customers, we feel like people will naturally gravitate towards whatever's best for them, and so we don't want to lose sight of that.
Blue Apron is kind of seen as this darling in the food space, though I'm sure it hasn't been easy during this whole process. What's some advice, or what's one thing you wish you had known when you first co-founded this company?
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus on hiring, we started the company 3.5 years ago, and you know, I don't think anybody expected this to take off as quickly as it has. You know, we are shipping over 8 million meals a month now, and that really takes an incredible team to kind of pull together and get these boxes out the door every week. So I think the focus on hiring, really making sure to kind of plan ahead and hire for growth is really important. You know, people ask often, what's the hardest thing about this? And it's definitely hiring, like finding talent that can kind of keep up with the demand and keep up with the scale. And you know, there isn't really software or a playbook for a business like this. So we've just managed to pull together an incredible team that can kind of think on their feet and innovate solutions to the problems that we see every day.
Yeah, speaking of hiring, backstage, you guys were saying that there's actually been some crossover between, let's see, was it from Blue Apron to Maple, or was it from...
To Sweetgreen, yeah.
From Blue Apron
I wouldn't
to
do
Sweetgreen.
that. Yeah.
Maple, you've taken... Caleb, you haven't
I was
been able
actually
to-
saying, so my wife interviewed with Blue Apron really early on.
Very early
Okay.
on.
And she was like, this is not going to go anywhere. I'm out. So, you know, our bad.
Yeah, we were upset
Yeah.
that we didn't get Julia, but it worked
Nice.
out.
So let's talk some predictions for the state of the food tech industry in the next year or so. Are we going to see consolidation? Do you think we'll see even more food companies pop up, or what do you think is going to happen? Ilya?
Yeah, you know, I think the space has been untapped, and even though a lot of companies have popped up in the past few years, I think we're going to continue to see more interesting, exciting, innovative companies come out. I think the country is kind of coming out of this like lull of you know, TV dinners and processed food, and There's more interest in cooking than ever before. There's more interest in where people's food is coming from. So there's a lot of opportunity there for people to kind of create new and innovative ways for people to kind of get, whether it's prepared food or ingredients that they're cooking at home. I'm really excited about what the future holds.
Yeah. Caleb, you think the future is bright for Maple?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to $1.4 trillion industry that has seen very, very little truly transformative implementation of technology, and I think there'll probably be less, entrants in sort of like droves as there have been in the past couple of years, just because I think investors again are a little tapped out on food right now, but. I think the reality is really, really large businesses are going to be built because you can look at the existing landscape right now, and there's just a lineup of massive companies out there. And so I think certainly the next wave of business model is going to power that next big company.
Right, and I guess ultimately, I mean, we'll all decide, and we're going to decide if we want Blue Apron, Maple, Sweetgreen, or all of them, and yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Give a round of applause.